Our world is filled with a wide array of natural wonders, but none stand as the best representation of majesty than our glossary of mountains. Towering thousands of feet into the sky, these awe-inspiring peaks are scattered all across the globe, in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Two equally compelling mountains, the Matterhorn and Mount Everest, even have their own counterparts found at Disney's parks. In this episode, we'll explore these two iconic Disney attractions, the Matterhorn Bobsleds and Expedition Everest, and all the thrills, surprises, and unforgettable encounters offered by these two treacherous adventures. So gather up your hiking gear, practice your Yeti growl, and be sure to take heed of this very important piece of advice.
Remain seated, please. Permanecer sentados, por favor.
Our journey begins in Southern California with the Matterhorn Bobsleds, a classic attraction whose story began with a simple pile of dirt. During the construction of Disneyland, crews excavated dirt around Sleeping Beauty Castle to make way for the castle's moat. The leftover dirt was piled together in an area between Fantasyland and Tomorrowland. By the time Disneyland debuted to the public, the dirt mound had been transformed into Holiday Hill, a picturesque location intended for picnicking. Unfortunately for park management, the spot became quite popular among younger guests who preferred to explore each other rather than the hill itself. When the park's Skyway attraction opened in 1956, Walt Disney saw an opportunity to make a new attraction at the hill's location. Walt and the Imagineers combined the concepts of a toboggan and bobsled ride that would go through a new artificial mountain. The Matterhorn became the peak of choice after Walt Disney became captivated by the real mountain's beauty while filming Third Man on the Mountain in the Swiss Alps. To convince guests that Disney's version of the Matterhorn was taller than it really was, the Imagineers employed an age-old optical illusion called forced perspective, where an object is scaled smaller the taller it becomes, creating the illusion that the object looks bigger than it actually is. The Matterhorn's internal design was also critical, as it would have to conceal the Skyway's central pylon. Thus, a large hole was carved through the mountain to allow the Skyway's buckets to pass through. In fact, the mountain was layered with so many holes that whenever people asked Walt as to why his mountain had holes in it, he would candidly reply, "Because it's a Swiss mountain." The Matterhorn Bobsleds debuted as the world's first tubular roller coaster on June 14, 1959, and the first in a series of attractions known as e-tickets, a term used by Disney to describe major attractions at their theme parks. In the 1970s, a peculiar geological event occurred. The Matterhorn was moved from Tomorrowland to Fantasyland. You might be wondering what type of forces were responsible for moving the 147-foot-tall mountain across a theme park. It wasn't an earthquake, nor was it pixie dust. The action was in fact very simple. Disney had changed the park maps. The Matterhorn, however, wasn't the only arrival that Fantasyland welcomed in that decade. As part of the mountain's relocation program, Imagineer Steve Kirk designed 3 audio-animatronic abominable snowman figures that were added throughout the ride, a scary new addition to an attraction that was otherwise devoid of such terror. Other thematic elements such as ice tunnels and crystal caverns were added to make the mountain more convincing than before. The most noticeable change happened in 1994, when the large hole in the mountain was patched up after the Skyway attraction closed. 18 years later, the Matterhorn underwent another refurbishment, this time concentrating on the attraction's exterior. The mountain's decades-old snowy white paint was changed into a more accurate depiction of the Matterhorn, a dark gray color with slight patches of snow. For even greater realism, Imagineers added beads of glass to the snow-covered portions of the mountain to mimic the sunlight-reflecting properties of real ice crystals. With all of its qualities, the Matterhorn Bobsleds is a shining example of how a simple idea can be magnified into a creative and timeless attraction. 2,175 miles away in Central Florida, another attraction takes that very same principle and elevates it to an unprecedented and arguably far more terrifying level. In the late 1970s, while the Matterhorn was welcoming its new hairy resident, Walt Disney World was searching for its very own mountain. The design of Disneyland's Matterhorn didn't mesh very well with the Magic Kingdom's layout. Therefore, the plans were taken nearby to Epcot's World Showcase, where they morphed into other short-lived ideas, such as a Mount Fuji roller coaster in the Japanese Pavilion, and a New Switzerland Pavilion with an East Coast cousin of the Matterhorn. Despite the opening of several other mountains all across the resort, it would take several more years and the opening of another theme park for the idea of a snow-capped mountain rising from the Central Florida landscape to finally come to fruition. By 1998, Walt Disney World's fourth theme park, Disney's Animal Kingdom, opened, and with it, the future home of Expedition Everest, a turbulent train ride through the legendary Himalayan mountain range. However, before a single shovel could hit the dirt, a story had to be crafted first. Led by Joe Rohde, the Imagineering team underwent one of the most meticulous research trips the unit was ever faced with. Several Imagineers traveled to Nepal and Tibet to thoroughly examine the culture and lifestyle of the Himalayas, in order to fully replicate an authentic look to the ancient Himalayan village surrounding the attraction. Quite possibly the most integral part of the attraction's research was the study of the Yeti, a mythical ape-like creature said to be living in the Himalayan mountains. Respected by the indigenous people and shrouded in legend, the study of this mysterious and elusive creature would ultimately lead the Imagineers in creating one of the most advanced and fearsome audio-animatronic figures ever brought to life at a Disney park. From their field research and scientific aid from leading primatologists, the Imagineers designed their Yeti to look as realistic and frightening as possible. If the creature's appearance wasn't intimidating enough, its technical anatomy was even more unnerving. At 25 feet tall and weighing 4 tons, the audio-animatronic Yeti is the most technologically complex figure designed by Walt Disney Imagineering to date, generating more thrust than a 747 airliner. Unlike the Matterhorn Bobsleds, Expedition Everest has a rich story behind it, possibly the most detailed for any of Disney's roller coasters. At one point, the village of Circazong had a prosperous economy that relied heavily on a tea plantation located in the foothills of the Forbidden Mountain, where the crop was cultivated and then transported by steam train to the nearby town of Anandapur. However, the plantation was unexpectedly closed, leading the locals to believe that the Yeti, regarded as the mountain's guardian, was responsible. Several years later, two gentlemen, Norbu and Bob, established their own expedition agency and repurposed the tea company's former buildings and steam train. As the company attracted more people, the number of Yeti sightings increased, bringing the story to the present day, where guests are taken on an expedition to the Forbidden Mountain to discover once and for all whether the legend of the Yeti is true. With research and story in place, the most crucial challenge came with the attraction's construction. The Imagineers had to make sure that the attraction was specifically designed and built so that the mountain structure and the roller coaster structure never actually touch at any one point. The reason as to why is simple physics. The roller coaster track vibrates as the train travels on it. Therefore, if that vibration were to affect the stationary mountain itself, it would create a massive disturbance in the superstructure's stability. In other words, a very short ride for guests. Further complicating the attraction's infrastructure was a third component, the Yeti itself, which rests on its own separate structure. Contrary to what most people believe, the main peak in the attraction is not actually Mount Everest. Instead, it is the fictional Forbidden Mountain as described in the story. Everest itself is represented by the mountain peak on the right side of the range, which serves as yet another example of forced perspective. Expedition Everest: Legend of the Forbidden Mountain debuted on April 7, 2006 as the world's most expensive roller coaster, costing an estimated $100 million. However, a few months after the attraction's opening, an unfortunate setback occurred. The foundation of the enormous Yeti audio animatronic was found to be unstable, and therefore the Yeti was left to operate as a static figure with an added strobe light to simulate movement. Despite years of fan backlash, the Yeti figure has yet to be repaired, as the procedure would require an extensive and lengthy re-examination of the entire superstructure. Only time will tell whether the startling creature will ever be able to inflict its hair-raising form of power again. Needless to say, Expedition Everest's inventive storytelling and adrenaline-fueled thrills continue to strike fear in even the bravest of park guests. Themed to a quaint Swedish outpost, the Matterhorn features two separate but near identical tracks, one facing Fantasyland and the other Tomorrowland. After reaching the top of the Matterhorn, the bobsleds wind through various dips and turns inside the mountain's cavernous openings until they arrive back at the station, but not before splashing down in a chilly alpine lake. The desolate backdrop of Expedition Everest is far more elaborate and effective in conveying a story than its distant Californian cousin. The ride's queue snakes through the former buildings of the Royal Anandapur Tea Company, which now contains the supplies and equipment used by the Himalayan Escapes Expedition Agency. The last portion of the queue is dedicated to artifacts relating to the Yeti, giving the riders an impression of how formidable the supposed mythical creature is. Aboard the steam train, riders are taken through the slopes of the green foothills before the train is taken up the 112-foot-tall lift hill. Reaching the mountain's summit of almost 200 feet, the riders are met with an unexpected twist. The track has been severed, and the train is abruptly suspended in motion. Suddenly, the brakes give out, and the train hurtles backwards through complete darkness. Pausing briefly, the train realigns its direction and descends into the attraction's signature 80-foot drop, traveling at a peak speed of 50 miles per hour. The train then enters a series of sharp drops and turns through the mountain before cruising past the Yeti itself as it growls and claws at the riders. After the encounter, the train glides out of the mountain for a final time and returns to the station unharmed. Two unique and exciting attractions not found anywhere else in the world. One offers the charm and novelty of an adventurous holiday in the Alps, the other a terrifying encounter with one of the world's most menacing mythical beings. Owing their existence to some of the world's most astonishing locations and the incredible talents of Disney's Imagineers, the Matterhorn Bobsleds and Expedition Everest have each created an aura of everlasting reign over their theme park domains.